Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Bet UK is empowering the everyday wins, cheeky grins, big conversations, budding aspirations. Our goal? To make EdTech accessible and teaching exceptional. Join the global education community on the 24th to the 26th of January 2024 as we make education better together. Tick it off your Christmas list today. Get your free ticket before the 13th of December deadline. Visit www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, I'm Amanda Kinsley-Smith. Thank you for joining me for my second show with Teachers Talk Radio. This is the Sunday Late Show on Sunday, the 10th of December. My guest tonight is Erica Luke, who has 30 years of experience as a teacher and who's been a senior leader since 2002. We'll be looking at a good news story tonight with some insights into how you can stay in teaching without it burning you out.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, there seems to be a lot of talk at the minute about some of the negative news stories around recruitment in the teaching profession. And rightly so. In this week, where just on the 7th of December, there was the initial teacher training census statistics being published, showing that the government's missed its target for secondary teacher recruitment by 50%. So there's a lot of negatives, and on these sort of dark December nights, tonight we have something a bit different. Tonight we have Erica Luke, who has been a teacher for 30 years and counting. She's not finished yet. And who has been a senior leader since 2002. So just over 20 years experience there as well. And what we're going to be doing tonight is looking at some of the positives in teaching. So looking back at the 30 years in teaching that Erica has so far, discussing why she has stayed, and giving some advice on how to not just survive, but thrive in teaching, and very importantly, have a life outside it as well. So, Erica, I can see you're already in with us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No problem, Amanda. Yes.
Thank you. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing Erica because she's going to be much better at doing that than I am. But what I will say from the off is, do you know when people are described as a tonic? Erica Luke is a tonic. So in terms of energizing and the passion that she has for everything that she has done, not just in a school setting, but in the rest of her life as well, which is exactly what we need, because we're teachers, yes, but we're lots of other things as well before we ever entered the classroom as a teacher. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Erica.
No problem at all, Amanda. Great way to spend a Sunday night.
Isn't it just?
I've already brought my husband. My husband is sitting in the green room, so I was sitting there as if I was in the green room, waiting to go, so all's good. At least the technology has worked. That was my major issue, but it's all good.
I know, very, very relieved whenever things come together in that direction. Now,
exactly.
I'm always interested in the story of how people ended up teaching in the first place, because there's always such a variation. And sometimes you get, yes, this is what I've always wanted to do, but so often it's something different. It's people have taken different paths in. So as Julie Andrews famously sings in a movie that's often on at this time of year, let's start at the very beginning. It seems to be a very good place to start.
To start.
So What was your inspiration? What drew you into teaching? Did you have family in teaching already, or what drew you to teaching as a profession?
Well, when I was at school, I absolutely loved school, and I was involved in everything, as my granny would say, but the crib. I was in the choir, I was in the orchestra, I was in the drama, I was in the school plays. I was even in the hockey teams, even if it was only the B team, but I still played hockey on a Saturday morning, even though it wasn't very good. I was usually put into the goal. But all of that, I embraced myself totally in school life, and as I say, I really loved it. And so for me, it was almost like I always kind of had a hankering to give back to that, of something that I had gleaned so much and learned so much. And also, while I was at school, I ended up both inside school and outside school doing different leadership roles, voluntary. And I kind of thought that that was really where that's what I really enjoyed. I remember meeting my husband's mother for the first time, my now husband's mother for the first time, and she asked me what I liked, and I said I like drama and I like organizing people, and I think that was
Yeah.
sort of my skill set. Um, and then I also, obviously, with most people, I had two main teachers. I had an English teacher who taught me for 5 years. And way back then, when I was 11, that's 41 years ago, she was doing active teaching things. Like I remember doing an advert for a chocolate bar, like singing it. She was very into that. And then not realizing it at the time, but my friend's mother died when she was 13. And what she was giving to her was loads of pastoral care. Obviously, I didn't recognize that's what it was at the time, but I knew she was very, very kind. And then I had two history teachers who were absolutely passionate about history. Like they loved history, and they were dead easy to get off on a tangent because they read so many books. And they were so well read, so knowledgeable, and they took us on loads of trips. So I really felt that that's where my skill set lay. And actually, funny, I was looking at an old report. You like this, Amanda? I was looking at a report, and it said, Erica loves to involve herself in school life, including things that don't concern her.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can imagine busybody me. And
That's
then
a
when I went,
diplomatic way of putting it,
isn't
isn't it,
it?
on a
Isn't
report?
it? And then I went to, and then I started, but I couldn't find the passion for what it was that I wanted to teach. And then when I went into sixth form, I started to do A-level economics, and that became my passion. I loved it. I was an absolute economics nerd. I even had a stock exchange sweatshirt. That's how nerdy I was. And I used to hold revision classes for the other pupils at lunchtime because they didn't understand economics, and I understand it. It was just like I loved it. So I did that. And so that made me really want to be an economics teacher. Both of my parents had businesses. Um, but so it wasn't teaching was never, there was no one in my family who was a teacher, but my parents have always been very supportive of what I wanted to do. So they were very happy, if that's what I wanted to do. But one stumbling block to it was the careers. And you'll recognize this, many of you who are listening, from the fact that, when you are academic, there's a certain expectation that you go in a direction. And, in my time, and it still is the same, if it's literary, it's law, and if it's, sciences, it's medicine. And I went to the careers teacher, and she was what you would describe as a Rottweiler. And she was not like what I would. Now, I haven't said that. My boss calls me the Rottweiler sometimes, but I don't think I'm in her league. She was wild, and she basically told me that I wasn't being a teacher, that I was going to Queen's to do law. End of message. And so I found myself having to apply to law, and getting the grades, and actually having to go. Because I thought, oh, sure, I'll just rock round to economics, and say, look at me, I've got 3 A's, can I come in here? But of course, that didn't happen. And so I started the law, was very miserable. I went round every Friday, knocked on the door, begging for a place. And finally, after about 2 months, I got a place in economics. And you know what, Amanda? It was amazing because there was only 66 in the course and 60 of them were men. So it was a 1-to-10 ratio for the rest of us. And so from there, I did my economics degree, and then obviously I went on to do my PGCE. And as you said earlier, very interesting. One thing that I will always remember from the start of my PGC was the lecture on the first day saying, all of you people represent the successes of the education system. You all think that it's wonderful because you had a fantastic experience. And that brings me back to what I was saying earlier. That's why I became a teacher, because it was such a great experience for me. But there he was standing saying, you're now going out into a world where not everybody thinks like that. And I always remember that because it's so important. We think that because we enjoyed school, we loved school, we went, and our parents maybe were engaged with it as well, that that's the same for other people. And also on that PGCE course, there was, and you were talking about energy and that, whenever I did the micro teaching, which is the bit where they video you teaching and then they give you feedback. And I remember the lecturer saying to me, Erica, give me feedback on the lesson. And then he said to me, but with that level of energy, you will be burnt out in 2 years. And I would like to say that it proved him wrong. After 30 years, I do flag now towards the end of an hour and 10 minutes. And I do go to bed probably about 8:30 on a Friday night. But having said that, I think I'm still able to deliver perhaps what I delivered all those years ago.
See, and this is why I was saying that this is a good news story. And this is such a great inspiration then for people to see, look, it is possible. And even whenever some people are telling you it's not, yes, it is. And you're the living proof. So really, you have been a teacher since you were in sixth form.
Yes, exactly.
If you were holding revision classes.
Holding revision classes, yes, for A-level economics students. Yeah, it was definitely in my blood.
I hope you still have that stock exchange jumper somewhere, Erica.
Because, I do. It's navy and it's lovely, yes.
And you can already see there how tenacious you are. We've got evidence of that then. So every Friday you were going around to see if you could get onto that economics degree course. Yeah. And that's something that I'm sure has come in helpful as a teacher.
Yes, totally. You do have to be determined, and my view, I'm always very big into injustice, and I was thinking, like, there I am with my 3 A's, and there's people sitting in there that've got B's and C's, like, why can't you let me in, and it went back to the careers, at the end of the day, and careers advice is so important, and that's one of the things in school, at the school that I'm in, that is a big thing. Careers advice is so huge, and what careers teachers say to you really does have a major impact. But I will tell you something, Mandy, you like this, because whenever I applied for my first job, I was looking at my I think now my husband tells me that when I applied for jobs, there was no such thing as a CV. It hadn't been invented yet, but I don't think that's true. It might have been an application form. I'm not too sure. But I looked at it, and I remember looking at it and thinking, it doesn't have enough. All the extracurricular is drama, music, that kind of thing. There's no sport on it. So I wrote on it that, I really, I play badminton. Now, my playing of badminton was meeting up with a friend of mine the odd week at the leisure centre and talking to her at the net. Never actually played any badminton. And so when I got the job, and I came in the September for my timetable, not only was I taking year 10 games and badminton, but I also was running the entire badminton teams.
No.
And I actually didn't even know how to play it. Neither did I know how to score it. And of course, in those days, there was no Google. So I had to go to the library and get a book out. And I think it's a good lesson, because I think that sometimes when we are applying for jobs and we're looking at, as a newly qualified teacher, we want to bulk out what we do. It's not that when I say I'm lying, I suppose I was lying. It was a wee white lie. I did kind of play badminton, but you want to meet out. But realistically, in terms of those things, you're better to stick to a couple and to really have a passion about them, rather than try. If you come into an interview and you tell them that you're going to do this, and about 10 things, the people interviewing you, that's not possible. And so that's definitely one lesson I learned. Do not lie on your CV. And I actually even had to go and buy a pair of trainers, because I don't do it anymore. I didn't even have a pair of trainers. So, don't lie on your CV. That's one thing not to do, definitely, if you're applying for jobs.
Okay, I'm making a little note of this, because I'm sure there are going to be lessons the whole way through. So lesson one, lie, or you'll end up having to get a book on badminton out of the library, have to buy a pair of trainers, and then off you go to teach games.
That's right, exactly.
That must have been an interesting conversation.
Yes.
And 20 years of being a senior leader. So Erica, you had told us there about your journey through studying economics whenever you finally bashed down the door and they made them let you in. And then you went on to do your PGCE after that. How did you find the beginning of your teaching career?
Well, I found when I first started teaching, I had actually a wee bit of a difficult start when I went for the interview. It was a very hot day, and I was there very early, because I was a country person. I hadn't really been to East Belfast very much. And I had parked my car at Stormont. And then when I thought, right, it's time to go now and drive to the school, the car wouldn't start. So I had to run all the way from Stormont to the school for the interview. So that by the time I got there, I looked awful. My makeup was sitting on my chin. And then when I got into the interview, I was actually wearing the same Marks and Spencer suit as the principal, which again was very embarrassing. To be fair, the chair of the Board of Governors said, "Would you like to take your jacket off?" Which wasn't so bad. So eventually I did get the job. And when I started into teaching A-level economics and into A-level business studies. And they had never been in the school before. So I was a newly qualified teacher introducing 2 new A-levels with no
Wow.
support, because obviously no one else was teaching it. And so in terms of lessons, I know somebody might not be being quite thrown into that, but I think one of the key things is you have to get yourself a support network. And obviously I didn't have a subject support network. And so what I did was I looked around and I joined the Northern Ireland Association for Business Studies Teachers. And there at that, I got to meet, they met once a month, and we got to meet them and got to meet, talk about, and obviously I was able to exchange information. And from that, I got into examining. And I've been an examiner for 29 years now. And I got into that. And again, that meant that I met people who were teaching those subjects. And in those days, there was no such thing. Nowadays, we have teacher tutors and we have people who mentor us when we start school. Obviously, at that stage, they didn't have that. But I made friends with 2 more experienced teachers and they were amazing. I asked them loads of questions. They helped me. When I had a problem, maybe with the parents, I would have had quite a lot in the beginning, quite a lot of parents who would have been quite vocal about the fact that I had no experience, which was absolutely true, and that's hard to justify because it is correct. And so they would have given me really good advice. So I think, having a supportive network for both my subject and also for just general day-to-day information about school was really excellent.
So you've understood the benefits then of that support network right from the beginning. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think that I think that's really, really important. It's something that I have been finding in recent years has really made a difference. And especially in areas where you maybe aren't as experienced, being able to go to
Yes.
people who have been there. And for me, I've been extremely lucky where the first school that I was in made full time. I'm still there, and I had people who taught me who were then able to. I didn't have that embarrassment of going and saying, "I don't know how to do this. Can you help?" Because there were people
Yes,
I'd always
exactly.
gone to for help. But now I'm finding the benefit as well of the extended networks that we have
Yes.
um, outside of subject areas and within subject areas, within middle leadership, senior leadership, right through the whole gamut, and just how beneficial that can be for your own perspective and for your own sense of, well, I suppose in a way, your own sense of beating the imposter syndrome at times and
Yes,
being able
yes,
to
yes.
go, do you know what? People struggle with these things. I'm not on my own here. And I
That's
can
right.
help other people when I know what I'm doing as well.
Yes, I agree. And a lot, if you know yourself, now that we're back to face courses, and not just stuck in teams, it is when you go to courses, it's actually about the talking to others. If you want to use the term networking, but it's that actually is usually more beneficial than the content of the course. And when you go along, we have an area learning community where my school is, and being a member of that, it's great to know that in other local schools they're having the same problems as we're having. And you're obviously able to look at ways to solve those. So yes, I totally agree that that's very important. Another very lesson that I learned as well at that beginning is that when you're a newly qualified teacher and you arrive in a school, one of the things is everybody wants you because you are new, and everybody thinks, oh, there's the new teacher. They'll help us with this club, they'll help us with that club. And if you're new, you have this overwhelming desire, obviously, to please and not to want to annoy or upset anybody. And I would say to anybody who's starting in a job that you have to be almost before you go in, decide what it is extracurricular that you want to get involved in and have a plan for that from the beginning. Because then when people ask you, you can say, well, no, actually, I'm already involved in, whatever it is. I'll give you a good example. When I first started teaching, I was a bit like that. Because in the school I moved into, they hadn't had a new teacher for about 9 years, I think. So I was like almost like a person in the zoo. Everybody was looking at me. Here we have a new 22-year-old. Woohoo! And so I was being asked to do everything. And one of the things that I was asked to do was to do the Mourne Ramble. Now, the Mourne Ramble was going up the Mournes with the police service. And I obviously didn't want to let the person down. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And I mean, again, not even thinking. I was thinking it's like going for a dander. It is not. It's like hiking the Mournes. It was absolutely horrendous. I will never forget it until my dying day. It was snowing. You had to climb over walls. And the only thing that made it slightly better was the fact that there was some good looking policemen. But apart from that, the experience was awful. And when I came back, people were saying, well, how was the Mournes? And I apologize to anybody out there who loves rambling in mountains. Like, if that's your thing, that's fine. But they said to me, what was it like? I said, it was awful. I've seen the Mournes. I will never be back. And I think that's correct. And I think that's a lesson, because I see that in new teachers coming in, new teachers coming in, and they're being grabbed. And I think it's a good idea to have your ideas about what it is that you would like to get involved in before you begin, so that doesn't happen to you and you don't get into those dilemmas.
And you don't end up the Mournes. I'm
Exactly.
seeing a theme, Erica, where we've got badminton ending up all of a sudden. We've got running for your first interview. Past Stormont, in your suit, which is an entertaining image in itself.
And high heels, obviously. Well,
that's what I was going to say. I'm seeing trainers as being a common theme here. So maybe as an NQT, we need to have another lesson of invest in a good pair of trainers, because you might well.
Yes, that's right. You never know where you're going to end up.
And then
one lesson I learned very quickly was don't believe kids. I'd only been there maybe about 4 weeks, and I was asked to take a trip to the Lyric Theatre, and it was year 10, and I was on the bus with them. And when we were leaving, I was like, right, is everybody here? The naivety of being a new teacher. Is everybody here? Is anybody missing? No, we're all here. Woo-hoo. Got onto the bus. And of course, those days there was no mobile phones. And then when we got back to school, discovered that 2 girls had been left in the toilets. So then I learned the lesson of, in teaching, you always count them in, always count them out. Never assume that what they tell you is actually the truth. So again, those were some of my very early lessons that I learned very quickly.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Bet UK is empowering the everyday wins, cheeky grins, big conversations, budding aspirations. Our goal? To make EdTech accessible and teaching exceptional. Join the global education community on the 24th to the 26th of January 2024 as we make education better together. Ticket off your Christmas list today. Get your free ticket before the 13th of December deadline. Visit www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
Wow, I bet that was a fun conversation. As an NQT, I've lost 2.
Yeah, I've lost 2. That's right. 2 year 10s are missing.
So, in your first few teaching jobs, then were you in long term in places? Was there much chopping and changing?
No, I have actually. Yep, I have actually been in the same school for 30 years, which for a lot of people listening would say that is career suicide. That you have to move schools to learn, to learn more things, that you have to move schools. And I get that. I totally, totally get that. And a lot of people think that if you stay in the one place, that's very boring. And it's also not you're very risk adverse. But the reason that I have stayed for so long in the one place is because I realize that I am, and this is about, I'm going to talk maybe a bit more about this later. It's about accepting who you are. I am not I was trying to think of a good way to put this, but I am not your kind of robotic type teacher. I am quite extrovert. For example, I mean, just to give you a flavour of that, whenever I was supervising the P7 transfer test, a parent complained that their child was put off by my bright outfit. I didn't really think it was that bad, but so that was a bit embarrassing. But I am a certain way, and I wouldn't fit into a lot of other schools. And I did go for a couple other jobs, a few other jobs, but in one that I went for, and I think, to be fair, the principal was very, very honest with me, and I knew him, and he couldn't make up his mind between myself and a man. And in the end, he was very honest, and he said to me, "Look, Erica, the reason is I just think you're too much. I think it would be too much for me to work with you." Now that sounds cruel, but in actual fact, he's right. I am all singing, dancing, whatever, and that's not going to fit in everywhere. And I realized that, and I think I became happy in knowing that that's who I am and that I suited that school. And I've worked for 4 principals in that school, and every single one of them gets that and have allowed me to be me. They've allowed me to do mad things. They've allowed me to do organize different things, and they've always been happy to support me. So I made that decision, that's where I'm going to stay, because I think personally, for me and my skill base, that's where I'm best placed.
See, I think this is really interesting. This is partly why I wanted to get you on as a guest, particularly because there's a lot of talk on Twitter when someone is thinking of leaving teaching and asking for advice. Nearly always one of the first suggestions is, have you tried another school? Maybe try another school first, because you have to find your fit.
You do.
And it sounds like we are not worked.
Yeah. Yes. And you are, I read on Twitter as well, that, people are in what they describe now as these toxic schools. And I know there's been a number in the talk radio about that. But again, it's about you and where you fit in. I also believe very strongly in relationships. I think that, and I have been able in 30 years to establish great relationships with staff, with pupils, and now I'm teaching people's children. And I have a lot of relationship with families that I've taught, maybe three of the girls, and then I've taught mum as well. And people know who I am, and as a result, they trust me, and I am then part of the face of the school. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy people coming into school and saying, "Are you still here?" I'm like, "I'm only 52, But that's the joy of that. And I appreciate that for a lot of people, that's a negative thing. But for me, it's not. And it's one of the reasons why I'm still very happy in my career and thrive in it and love it, because I know that where I am is the right place.
Exactly. Well, just on that, when you're talking about the importance of forging those relationships, and it's with the pupils, it's with their families, it's with your colleagues. I happen to know that is particularly a strength of yours. And if there ever was evidence needed of that, the fact that just in recent weeks, you've been invited by one former colleague to help them pick out a kitchen. You've been invited to, new mothers' baby appointments with the doctors and things. You are trusted. You're trusted by your colleagues who become your friends, to be there for them through all sorts of things, not just helping them with the school-based issues that come up all the time, but
that's right.
Having that interest in them in the rest of their lives as well, because we are more than just one facet.
Yeah, totally. And that's part of that's the joy of the job. The joy of the job is, yes, of course, teaching in the classroom, but most of the joy of the job comes from outside the classroom. It comes from the child who at lunchtime, a wee year 8, who comes up to you. That's our first year in Northern Ireland. She comes up to you and she says, Mrs. Look, you've got some lovely clothes. She's for a woman of your shape, and that is so funny. I just think that's hilarious, because she's giving you a compliment, and she's put her own wee twist on it. Fair play to her. And it's those kind of things. And as you say, helping people outside. I always say my office is basically like I'm actually going to change the sign on to agony aunt, because in it there are conversations about mortgages, co-ownership, relationships. I've had a runaway groom at one time. One of my NQTs. And it's all about of being able to assist with that, and that's the bit that I really love and really enjoy still.
And then that's something that became part of your role as well, wasn't it? Where you were in charge of supporting student teachers and NQTs.
Yes.
How did you find that?
Yeah. Well, over the 30 years that I've been in school, obviously I've had probably every single job. And even now, I open the school up on a Friday morning. So even if now a caretaker role as well. But I've been head of department, obviously, head of year, head of sixth form, head of the house system, head of school community, head of school council. I was on the board of governors for 8 years. Now my main job is cover and basically the internal organisation of school life. But one of the jobs that I love the most, which you alluded to there, is the teacher tutor. I was teacher tutor for 18 years. I had to give it up 2 years ago because it just was too much. But during that time, with the other things I was doing, during that time, I was looking after student teachers. I was looking after teachers in their first 3 years of teaching. And I really love that. I really love the mentoring aspect of getting to know those people fresh in their teaching career, going to watch them teach, giving them guidance, and also learning from them and thinking to myself, gosh, that's a really good idea. That's a good thing I could do. And helping to give them confidence, because when you come into school, it's not easy. And to help them and be another, I suppose, sounding board for ideas, another sounding board for their problems or their issues. And through that work, I actually then became an associate assessor in one of the teaching colleges, and going out and watching teachers, who were in their teaching practices teaching as well, and also doing interviews. And that again opened up another wider. I was also at a time involved in a book. I was a case study, not in a psychiatrist book, but in an initial teacher training book as well. So all of that opened up lots of windows and opportunities. And I love many of those teachers now. Are now heads of departments, or now have other roles. And I love seeing them grow in confidence, even getting up and doing an assembly, which I know that was very difficult for them in terms of their nerves. That's really, really satisfying. And it keeps you young, Amanda. It keeps you young. Dealing with young people keeps you young. That's what I say.
Must be really interesting going and seeing, doing lesson observations in other schools as well, and seeing
it is
the talent that's out there in terms of the new teachers coming through, and seeing just the differences between the other schools, especially when you have been in one school for so long. It must be brilliant getting out to see what's happening in the other places too.
It is too, in terms of like what surprised me for everyone is the level of support. There is, a very big gulf in the level of support that's given in schools. And I think it's critical. I mean, you were talking at the start about retention, and people leaving teaching. So if you start teaching and it's not for you, or you feel it's not for you, if you don't have someone there to support you, it's critical that new teachers are supported in those first 3 years, because that's when they're most likely to walk. And why waste all that money and then being trained then if they're going to walk? So you do have to put in a good secure network, and a good support network for them to know basic things like where are they going to park their car, where are they going to have their lunch. I went out to one school and was really appalled to find that the teacher was eating their lunch in the car, because she went into the staff room and there was nowhere to sit and she didn't know what to do, and people so that's the kind of thing that we have to make sure is good in schools, and that's all about relationships, and that's, to me, that's the key thing. Be approachable.
Again, it's coming back to the relationships. And I agree completely. The past couple of years I've been involved in helping be a teacher tutor on a leadership course.
Yes.
And it's a course I did myself a few years ago. I have learned so much more from being the teacher tutor and sitting back and listening and helping to try my best to help solve issues, or put them in touch with the right people who can help them to solve issues, or those sorts of things, and listening to what they have been doing in their schools and giving that bit of support and assistance has helped me make really strong relationships with professionals that I wouldn't have come into contact with otherwise. But
No.
it's improved my teaching and my management and my leadership skills, watching them grow in confidence and watching them develop as leaders themselves.
Yeah, it's a very, very important job, and one that needs to be maybe in some schools elevated to a higher level, I think, because it is so important for all those reasons that you're saying.
It's devastating to think of an NQT
I know,
going
I know.
and sitting in their car, eating their lunch
in their
because
car.
they don't feel welcome.
No.
You know, of course, we're going to be losing teachers if that's the experience.
If that's the experience they have. Yeah, absolutely.
So
just
you
on
were
that,
in,
sorry, Amanda. No,
go
ahead.
please.
No, what I was going to say to you was, you know, the way you being an English teacher, and this week, Benjamin Zephaniah.
Benjamin Zephaniah.
Zephaniah. Sorry, I have it phonetically written down, but I still haven't said it right. You know, died, and I actually was looking at some of his work because I love poetry. As I was talking earlier about my English teacher, and I just thought, as part of this, I would read a little bit of one of his poems about people. It's very short, if you don't mind, because I think it encompasses what I'm trying to say. Is that all right?
Please do.
Okay.
We're big Benjamin Zephaniah fans in this house, so
yes, good.
Absolutely.
Good.
Any opportunity to celebrate his work, definitely, please go for it.
Okay. People need people to walk to talk to cry and rely on. People will always need people to love and to miss, to hug and to kiss. It's useful to have other people to whom to moan if you're all alone. It's so hard to share when there's no one is there. There's not much to do when there's no one but you. People will always need people. And I think that just kind of summarizes up just that piece of our conversation there.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's all about those relationships. And I just don't think that can be stressed enough. And we know this. We know this as teachers, but sometimes I think it does just bear repeating. And when things get so busy in school, sometimes that can be the thing to go. And it can just make such an impact.
Yes, it can. And I think as well, you know, we live in a society where, and I always say this to the girls as well, you know, in school, is that don't be afraid to ask for help. I think we live in a world where asking for help is seen as a sign of weakness. Asking questions means you're stupid, but it's not. It's actually, if you don't ask for help and you don't ask questions, you can't learn. And that is critical as an NQT. Don't sit and stress. Never do that. Go and you know, find someone, whether it's your head of department or whether it's the head of year that you're with, or if you have a teacher tutor, go and ask for help and go and find out, rather than sitting at home worrying about it. Because what I find in my 20 or my 18 years experience doing that is that an NQT comes along with what they think is a mammoth problem, and actually it's very minor. You know, and it can be fixed. And I always say everything can be fixed. Always say your problem and we'll try and sort it out. And that's key, I think, when you're an NQT.
Yeah, I think so too. And the whole way through, especially for me, whenever I first moved into middle leadership.
Yes.
Oh, I as we say over here, I was scundered having to ask questions. I was mortified. I didn't like going to ask questions because I was terrified someone was going to think that meant I wasn't up to the job, and they would take it away again.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's the best way to get yourself into an absolute nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, worry yourself stressed about something that you don't need to worry about, and that I've probably, or whoever's looking after you, has heard 25 times, you know, or maybe more. So it's not a problem. That's what the teacher tutor. That's why people have those responsibilities and are paid for them, because it's their job to help you. That's their job.
And I was very lucky because whenever I took over as head of English in my school, my former head of department was still there. She had stepped down from the role, and I had stepped into it. And you could not have got a more supportive, wonderful person who would be only too happy to help. Yeah, and it was my issue. I had to get over that fear of, I almost as if it would come to a question of my competency, which is ridiculous, because asking the questions was showing competency. It was showing awareness of where the gaps were that I needed help with. And once I started speaking, suddenly there was loads of support there for me to access. And it's just, as you say, don't sit and stress, ask the questions, because it's not a weakness.
No, it's not.
And
it's not.
You
very
will
much
burn
so.
out if you're taking all of these things on that you do not need to be taking on. And
How
I know
how are
that
you how are you supposed to know, if you're sitting in front of me, how are you supposed to know what I know when I've been doing it for 30 years? You're not supposed to.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's a journey, and we all learn as we go along. We all learn things, that we did wrong. I remember one day, I, like my history teacher, have a tendency to go off on a tangent. And this girl, we went off on a tangent. We started talking about tattoos. And I hadn't been teaching very long at the time, and she then was telling she got a tattoo, and then she was talking about the needle, and then in the room somebody fainted because they were scared of needles, and then someone else vomited because they were scared of somebody fainting. And it was
oh,
literally like emergency ward 10, and I'm standing there going, what am I supposed to do? I actually don't even know. And so I evacuated the room, got the school nurse, whatever, and got it all sorted. But I did get called up to the head's office. And she was quite cross because she said to me, what on earth teaching and learning was going on there? And I said, well, to be honest with you, there was a bit of first aid being learnt. It was probably a bit cheeky, but I mean, they did, because we had to get recovery position and all that out. But those are the things. The first day I took over, the senior leader, after Christmas, the principal wasn't there, and he was away at something. And when I rocked into school on the first day, there was a burst pipe in chemistry, and there was no water to flush the toilets. And everybody was looking at me saying, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, I've no idea. I ended up having to evacuate and send everybody home. That was on my first day. But those are the things that you get the experience, you learn them, and then you move on. So why not go and talk to people who've done it before, and they can assist you.
so we've had stories with trainers, and now we've had two in a row about evacuations.
I've also, Amanda, had the police called on me. I went to in many years ago, in the sixth form, the teachers who had sixth form would have brought them to their house. Obviously, you don't do that now with safeguarding and all of that. But the sixth formers, when they were leaving, came to your house, and I had a barbecue for all my sixth form, and a couple of other teachers came. One of them was an aerobics teacher, and she did aerobics out in my front lawn. And one of the neighbours phoned the police because of the noise. And looking back, could you imagine that now, like in social media? Teacher,
Oh,
get all over that. But again, these are all the things that you learn as you go along. Interesting.
very. And speaking of aerobics and barbecues and all
Yes,
sorts of other
yes,
things, I
yeah,
know that something that can contribute to whether or not someone stays in teaching is trying to get that balance
yeah. Hmm.
between work and the rest of their life.
Hmm.
And I know you're involved in, well, you're involved in all sorts of things outside of school,
Yeah.
but in terms of sporting organizations,
Hmm.
you've broken down some barriers in those,
Hmm.
and you've always been interested in, and I've been really interested in seeing what you have said in the past about work-life balance and
Hmm.
having that space, because you don't just find space for these things outside of school, because if that
No.
space was already there, you would be filling it with something. You have to
Yeah.
carve out space to be able to have positive mental health and be able
Hmm.
to keep your interests up and do other things that then will benefit you by giving you more energy when you come into the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I have always been, involved in lots of things. I've sang in a band. As I say, I've done examining. I've done all sorts of things. I helped start up a credit union at a time. But I suppose currently my biggest outside interest is that of cricket. And I don't play cricket myself. It was a situation where my son was very into cricket, and I used to stand and watch. I went and bought a book again, like my badminton, and learnt the rules of cricket. And then, of course, you get a wee job, and then you get another wee job. And I also felt that my son had benefited greatly from cricket. I think he learnt a lot of really good skills. And so, therefore, and I felt that the people in the cricket club had been really good to him and really good for him and for his self confidence. And so I wanted to give something back. But obviously, a number of years ago, it's a very male dominated environment. And I was asked to be the secretary of the cricket club. And that caused a lot of controversy because, first of all, I was a woman, but secondly, I didn't play cricket. And it was the idea that, you have to be a cricketer to run a cricket club, but actually you don't. You have to have the skills that are very similar to the skills that I use in school, which are obviously dealing with people, organizing, building relationships, having strategic vision, all of those kind of things. And so, to be fair, I mean, I had a few. Was not invited to a dinner, for example, because I was female, even though I was a member of the club. And I have had a few trials and tribulations. Another good example, this is quite a funny one. This wasn't at my cricket club, but when I took over as the secretary, I went to watch my team playing in a cup final. And I drove in my car, and the two men at the gate says to me, "Hey, love, the catering staff's round the back." And I was like, "Excuse me, I'm the secretary of the cricket club, thank you." But now, as time has gone on and people have seen the contribution that I have made, I'm quite infamous now in the cricket world. Everybody knows who I am, and I have been elevated further to be on the executive, which is the secretary of rugby, hockey, and cricket. And I've also been asked to speak at rugby lunches, which was again an area where females never trod. Never mind a female speaking at a rugby dinner, but a female involve a cricket speaking at a rugby dinner. Like that's just that's way off. But I've been asked for the third year in a row. I'm doing it after Christmas, so obviously I'm doing something right. But a lot of people will say to me, like, how can you be bothered with that? You spend all your day organizing people and busy, you're busy all day, and then you're doing that as well. But I think it's very important that you do have a balance, because as you said, it gives you energy. I mean, if you read a lot of information from mental health, I'm just looking for the organization that I'll find it in a minute, that I had read about volunteering being one of the main things to do as part of your work-life balance, even though it seems that it's madness. But it's the idea that you are finding a new group of people. And that's, I have found some really great friends in the cricket club, and I have enjoyed having a different group of people in my life, as well as obviously, my colleagues at school. So that for me has been a really, and just even the simplicity of it, just being able to go down to sit in the bunker, what we call it the bunker, and look out and watch people. And it's so calm. And on a lovely sunny day, it's wonderful. And I've been all around Ireland. I've seen lots of lovely places. And so, yeah, I think that complements the job that I have, and also actually gives me energy, even though it's something else that I'm giving to.
This just sounds like exactly what I was hoping for, really, with this discussion, which is looking at some practical things that have impacted you and why you're still thriving and enjoying this career that so many do get burnt out and leave. So that's really had an impact then on you as a teacher and a leader.
Yes, I think so. And I think as well, I was trying to, when I was preparing for this, I was trying to think, what is the big issue? If you look at the statistics, as you were saying at the beginning, like the statistics are terrible. Like 84% of senior leaders, admit to feeling stress. 87% of them admit to having, symptoms. And in the teacher world, generally, not just senior leaders, you're looking at 70%. Like it's according to the Office for National Statistics, like that is huge. And I was trying to think, if I was to try and summarize, I think a lot of it, Amanda, is linked to self-acceptance. You have to accept who you are. I said that earlier when I said why I'd stayed in the same school for 30 years. And there has to be a self-acceptance. And if you, because I've seen a lot of things on Twitter about people being worried about moving up leadership, maybe to middle or senior leadership, because maybe they've got a family. And if that's what you want to do, then you have to accept, yes, that's what I'm going to do. But it may mean that you have to say no to other things. And that's okay. And for example, I think one of the big issues is parenting. And what happens is that you think, well, I really, really want to go, I really want to be at that school nativity, or I really want to be at that. But if your senior leadership job is such that you can't, well, then you have to accept that. When I look back now, I think my children are now 27 and 23. When I look back, I was a senior leader, they were 2 and 6. And basically, I accepted that there was certain things that I was now. I am in a school now, or sorry, the school that I'm in is very good about things like that. It's very fortunate about things to do with your children. But there are some things you just have to say no to. And like I was thinking back to my own kids. They both learned to make pancakes in after school. That's okay. I didn't teach them, but that's fine. And it's about realizing that, I'm working, I can't bake for the school sale. I can't go to a Christmas thing in the afternoon, and accepting that and realizing that that's part of the person who you are and that's how you run your family. And I think that's a really big thing, and don't feel guilty about those things. I do have a few more wee practical tips regarding that if you want me to move on, or if you want to say something before I do that. I just tried to note down some of the things that I had done, coming through the system in trying to balance that idea of family and home.
I think that would be really helpful.
Okay. So, for example, one of the things that I would have done is I found a group of other mums that I affiliated with, and what I would have done is one of the things strikes. One of mine was invited to some super duper Santa thing, and it was in the afternoon. One of these that you have to book like 6 months in advance. And obviously, I couldn't go. And I asked one of the other mothers, and that's what I started to do. I would say, look, could you take Thomas to that, or could you take my daughter Alex to something? And then what I would have done is, then when I was off in the summer, I would have returned the favor. And I was always very honest about that. I was like, I can't do pickups necessarily. I can't do things like that, but I can take them for a day in the summer holidays or at half term. When I became a senior leader and I knew I had to be in early in the mornings, another mother lives beside me. She took my children to school for me at that time. And then I to help her children with their homework. So it's about finding people around you. And for some people, family are great. My parents and my in-laws, when they were alive, would have gone to things instead of me. And my children, I have to tell you, don't now go, oh, you didn't go to that. They remember, they remember the activity, and they remember somebody being there. So we have to not beat ourselves up about that. So I think that's very important. Making deals with people almost, and finding a group of people that you can rely on in times of certain things that maybe you can't get to, and being honest with the school. I was always very honest with school that I was working and that I couldn't do certain things. And if there was a cake sale on, I used to send in, like at those days, a fiver, because I didn't have time to bake a cake, nor probably even go to the shop to buy some. So be honest. It's a bit idea of coming back to ask for help. And then in schools, if your children are in schools, the teachers there know what you're experiencing. So they're always much more willing to help you. But you have to just be open and honest. And I think that's very a good thing. I also think that we are, and I was very fortunate not to be part of this, but a lot of parents I know in school are all in these WhatsApp groups, and they're WhatsApp groups of the class. And a couple of them said to me, it takes me half an hour to read them all at night. Well, what a waste of half an hour of your life. Reading WhatsApps from people who are sending stupid messages about, what costume they're doing for their children on Roald Dahl World Book Day. Get off them. Get off them. Be confident that you know what your child needs to do at school, that you know what that relationship is, and you don't need to involve yourself with other people's comments, because all it makes you do, to be honest with you, it makes you feel inadequate, because the people that are posting on that are generally not the people that are working maybe as the hours that you're working. And I would say, for your own mental health, don't get involved in those. That would be my advice. Because I do think that, you need to be focusing. And it's the same as well, Amanda. I became quite canny in what I went to. My husband is in a world where he gets invited to a lot of do's and a lot of meals and all sorts of things. And I used to go to them all. And the same when your child's at school, there'd be the P2 mummy's night out and the P2. And I actually, went to one of those and thought, I don't enjoy it. It's all competitive. It's all about, my child can swim 100 meters in, so many seconds. And I became quite good at looking at things and just saying, no, that's not of interest to me. I don't need to go to that. Because we fill our lives sometimes with a lot of things that aren't really necessary. And I think we could be more savvy about what we choose to go to and what we choose not to go to, I think. one of my colleagues has up in his room a quote from Roosevelt, which says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And I think that's totally true. Social media, everything now, we're always comparing ourselves to others, but be confident in yourself, in your family, what you choose to do with your family, and be self-accepting of that. In my house as well, in terms of the children growing up, again, you can find yourself being a taxi driver, which, yes, at times I was. I'm not saying that I wasn't, but, again, kids' activities. Do your kids need to go to all of these activities? My sister actually has just gone back to work. She's got 3 children, and she actually cut them all down to one each. And she says it's revolutionary. And I would have been the same. I would have got them to do things that they enjoyed and stuck to that. And the same with birthday parties. They could be at a birthday party every single week. And to be honest, I didn't. I would have said to them, "Do you really want to go to this one?" Because I wanted to spend time with them on a Saturday afternoon. So don't get caught up in all of that. Do what you think is best for your family. And even simple things like organizing. We had an area in the house where everybody from they were in P1, they had to bring down, I would say, go and get your swimming stuff, go and get your PE gear, and they had to leave it there. And that's what was put in the car in the mornings. And I remember one time my son didn't bring his swimming gear, and the school phoned, could you bring him his swimming gear? No, I can't, because I work it. And he didn't get swimming, but I tell you this, he never forgot his swimming stuff again. We get caught up by thinking that. And even things like lunches, I just said to my children, you have to have a school lunch. There's no debate. And when they got old enough, when they wanted to pack lunch, they made it themselves. Like my daughter would probably tell she was psychologically damaged because I ran my house like a school, but it was the way in which I was able to survive. And I think that there are lots of simple things that we can do, but I think the problem is we're too hard on ourselves, and I think that's a major issue.
That's really brilliant, Erica. Like that, that's very honest, everything that you were saying there. And I know an awful lot of people will be able to relate to everything you're saying there. And I've spoken to so many people in the past who have struggled with balancing home and school, or who've been put off applying for leadership roles because they're worried about finding that balance. And I think the two main things that I was taking from what you were saying there were, first of all, the self-acceptance and realizing, I remember someone explaining it to me once about, it's like you're trying to juggle a load of balls, and some of them are glass and some of them are plastic, and you're going to drop some. Nobody can keep them all in the air. So you just have to decide which ones are plastic and let them drop and focus on the glass ones and keep those safe. Yeah. So I think that realization of, you're not a terrible teacher if you say, actually, no, I can't do this voluntary event, or I can't do this. And you're not a terrible parent or partner, or friend or family member, or daughter or son, if you can't do every single activity or opportunity that comes up. And the other thing that I noticed was, yet again, and we've said this the whole way through our conversation tonight, relationships. It's coming down to the relationships as well, and deciding which ones are important, and you invest in them, and you give the support, and you get the support back. I think that everything you were saying there about those practical ways that you can help balance things, of when there are people that you can really rely on to help you, let them help you.
Let them help you. That's exactly right. No, I'm fine. Yes, no, I can manage all that. No, you can't. So it is about being honest, and it is about looking at that. I'm very fortunate that I have a very supportive husband, and we, again, in choices, as I said at the start, if you say yes to something, you have to say no to something else. And certainly when my kids were growing up, my husband didn't take anything to do with school. And in fact, whenever my son was leaving P7, the headmaster actually said, "Oh, are you Mr. Luke? We thought you were a figment of Mrs. Luke's imagination," because they'd never actually seen him. But that's not an indictment of my husband. The idea was that we felt that there wasn't any point in both of us going. Why should we both go? I'm the expert in that area. Well, in theory. And so I would be the one that would go. And then he did other things. My husband was great. He's great at running a house, much better than I am. Cooking, shopping, he's good at that, and obviously helping out the pickups. So we kind of, looked at what we were at, and I understand that, and people will maybe disagree and say, no, both parents should be there, and that's fine. But that's how I survived. We always made decisions to divide things out. between us, unless they were in the evenings and we could both go. But that's again another way of just not putting too much pressure that there has to be two. Kids will not really remember that. I can honestly tell you that. We entitled this, long days and short years, and the reason for that is I was linking that to people with families because I see it so much on Twitter. It is a long day having a child, but it honestly goes so quickly. I can remember bringing my son in through the front door, and it just seemed like a blinking of the eye, and then he was heading off to university. And there was another choice. I didn't take him to university because it was September. It was the start of the school year. I felt it wasn't appropriate for me to be away from school for 2 days. But he went with my husband. But it doesn't, on my father. But you don't have. And again, people will probably go, "Oh, but I want to take my son to university." That's fine if you do, but sometimes you have to make choices. I don't know if you've read, Amanda. Jill Berry publicizes, it's a YouTube video about subtraction, addition and subtraction. It's very, very clever. And it's on YouTube. It's really worth a look. Basically what she says, and it's so true, that we solve every problem in teaching by adding. So, if children aren't doing well, what do? We give them more work, which we then have to mark. If they're not getting it, we do revision classes, so we have to stay longer after school. If there is behaviour, we do another detention. So teaching is a culture of addition. We solve problems by adding. And what she, in the video, it's all about subtraction. And I suppose that's really what I'm talking about. It's about looking at what can I actually not do? How can I get around that problem without actually having to, sit and mark another set of books, or having to stand another day in the playground, or having to make 10 phone calls. And it's really very clever. And I think that is what it's about. What can you subtract? And it's actually okay for on a Saturday afternoon for you and your children to sit in your pajamas and watch a film. You don't have to be going out to jiu-jitsu or something else. And it's accepting that, and I think that's very important.
I think that sounds very relatable, and even in terms of one of the things to be subtracted, what you were saying about WhatsApp groups and the competition that can come between parents and between teachers as well, like being able to reduce that out of your life and go, because sometimes I find from looking on Twitter and things, I'm looking at these wonderful displays and resources people make, and people are so generous on Twitter, and
absolutely,
will share things with you and all sorts. But there are times when I look at their classrooms or what they've been doing, and I think, oh my goodness, I'm ahead of English, and I've not done anything like that in a long time.
And you see them on the first day of the summer holidays, and they're doing schemes of learning, and you're like, oh my goodness, like I'm having a cocktail and lying in the sun, absolutely, I agree. And that is that idea of comparison. Just be satisfied yourself. I think there's also lots of other wee things that we can do, and again, I suppose it depends on the school you're in. But the school that I am in are very good about the concept of emails and out of hours. So there is no expectation that emails are to be answered out of working hours. And they encourage staff, if you want to, like maybe you have to get home, and then I'll come back to this in a minute, but maybe you have to get home and then you do an hour's work later, that or whatever later. But don't then say the email doesn't actually come to people at 8 o'clock the next morning. And I think that has a big impact. And what I was going to say about the long days and the short years is that life is about phases. Life goes in phases. So, if you're worried about stepping up into senior leadership, because I know I was at the time, I was worried about my family and how that would impact. But the thing about it is, it's all phases. You maybe are at a phase. Some people out there could be at a phase now where they have to get up at 5:30 on a Sunday morning. My husband used to get up on the Saturday morning, and I used to get up on the Sunday. And you're lying there at 5:30, playing Lego, going, oh my goodness, But then eventually, that changes. Then the next thing is you can't get them out of bed. And 1 minute they're, you're running them here, and then the next minute they're driving. So you're not in that phase that you currently are in forever. And if you really want to be a senior leader, or you really want to step up, and if the opportunity is there, go for it, because in another 18 months, 2 years, the phase that you're currently in with your family could have moved on. It's not just, I mean, I know I'm talking a lot about children, but the reason I'm talking about children is because that's what I see on Twitter. And so I'm trying to address that. But it could be looking after elderly parents. It could be, there are all sorts of different issues that people have. But everything passes and moves on to another phase. I'm in a phase of my life now where my children live in Edinburgh. I've got empty nest syndrome, which was absolutely wonderful. I would recommend it to anybody. I am now my own master of time, so I can, and that's wonderful. But that's, I have come out the other side of that, and I keep saying that to people. Just enjoy the phases that your life goes through, because the years are short, and that's honestly very true.
I loved that. And I was going to mention that at some point, that the title for tonight's show came from you. And as soon as you suggested it, I just loved it. It really resonated with me, because the days, and just from a teaching perspective, the days do sometimes seem quite long, especially when there are a lot of things that pop up during the day that you're firefighting, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, there's this I haven't done yet, and haven't got that done. I'll need to do this. But then I was talking to some of my students last week, and they said something about, they asked some question about when I started teaching, and I realized that was 14 years ago.
Yeah, same.
14 years. I don't know where that's gone.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I don't know, something strange. Maybe someone who teaches physics can come in and help us with this one, but I don't understand how there are days when a double period seems to last forever. Yeah. Usually the ones where if the students are doing a test, because I think this is something we probably both have in common. I'm not very good at sitting silently while the students are doing something.
No, I'm not.
And I know that has to be part of it. But I find those lessons, or where you're, invigilating exams and things, it's just so dull. I'm used to talking to them.
That's right.
How that can seem to last forever. But the 14 years that I've been teaching has just gone in a flash. So I loved that you suggested that as the title, because it really does.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and it moves and it changes, and you will find yourself. I always, it's one of the things that I always tried to do is, it's very difficult. I appreciate that, to keep school and home separate. I live a good wee bit away from school, so by the time I get home, I've kind of decompressed a little bit, and I do try to do as much as I can. But I appreciate, when my kids were small, I didn't do that, because I wanted to go. And again, that's another thing, looking for schools that have wraparound care. My children went to school that I could, at one point I couldn't leave them off because I was doing the cover, and that's when I had another friend step in. But I certainly could have picked them up, and I could pick them up any day up until 6 o'clock if I wanted to. And sometimes grandparents, lifted them. That was grand. But, that is finding that level of support. Even in schools, be very canny about that. I think that's very important, because then as a parent, you can go and pick them up if you so wish to do that. All of that is very important, because it does all go very quickly. And I would also say to people, outsource what you can. I mean, I appreciate we live in times of times are tough, but I have always had a cleaner. And that's always, for me, in my house, been a non-negotiable. I would be happy to sacrifice something else, because I didn't want to spend my time cleaning. If I had free time at the weekend and whatever, I wanted to spend the time with my family, or doing some things by myself. I would say, if my children and husband will listen to this back, they'll be saying, oh, you were always running off doing your own thing. I can always remember when my son was 6 weeks old, and I sang in a band. And I came down the stairs all dressed up to the 99s and all my glittery stuff. And my husband was standing with Thomas in his arms, sort of giving me a look like, oh, really? And I said to him, David, I've got to keep my independence. He sort of just walked off. So, I've always been very good at getting my nails done and all the rest of it, and looking after myself. But, I don't want to, cleaning for me, and I know it's expensive, and I appreciate not everybody can afford it. But if there's anything that you can outsource, even in any way, look for those things in your subtractions that perhaps you don't necessarily, need to be doing. That's always, even if you have maybe like a nephew or a niece or something like that. I know a couple of my friends, had that slightly older nieces, nephews, and they paid them to run the Hoover around or to wash the bathroom. It might not be done to your exacting standards, but it saves you a wee job. That's what I'm always looking for. It's a subtraction. Exactly. That's exactly right.
While we're on those lines,
Yes.
how important do you think it is for students to see teachers as having a full life and interests and commitments outside of school, like family life or singing or cricket or anything? So I know there are some people that would be very, very clear on having them compartmentalized and not wanting to talk about anything personal with students, which is entirely their choice, and I'm not criticizing that.
No.
But you would be more open, I suppose, in some ways. Would that be
I would
right with your...
totally agree with what you say. I mean, I've read a lot of things again on Twitter. I have my way, because as you can imagine, my life is very full, so it's very, very highly organized. And I lie in bed on a Sunday morning, and my husband brings me tea, and that's when I do my guilty pleasure of Twitter, educational Twitter, on a Sunday morning for about 45 minutes and catch up on it all. And I do read a lot of things where people say about the fact that you shouldn't tell pupils anything about yourself. It should be strictly a professional relationship. And I suppose, Amanda, that does maybe depend on what kind of school you're in, because for some schools maybe you just couldn't. But personally, from day one, I mean, I remember when I first came to Bloomfield, or came to school, I brought in my photograph, I brought in my wedding album and showed it to them. And I teach business studies. Now I don't teach economics anymore, because business studies became so popular. But my family have businesses. I meet lots of people in cricket who have businesses. I meet along the way when I sang in the band and the Cowpacks, they all had their own businesses. And so I use that as examples. I use examples of how both of my children study differently than the other one, and how you can study. I use examples from experiences that I have had, customer services experience, taking stuff back to shops. My whole lessons are all about that. And for me, that is what forges the relationship, because they see what kind of person I am, and then they forge a relationship with me. And I've looked at some stuff on Twitter and thought, oh my goodness, if I was in that school, I'd have to resign. And maybe that comes back to what I was saying earlier about finding a fit.
Yeah.
For the school you're in. But I agree with you. There's some people who don't want to do that, and that's absolutely fine. Everybody finds their own niche. I remember when I did my PQH, professional qualification headship, I listened to two very eminent heads talk about how they had turned a school around. And one of them was like me. He was all go, all energy, all woohoo, and he was like me. He was tiny as well, because I'm only 5 foot, which is why I wear high heels all the time. And the other one was he was like a bit, would have reminded of a statesman, like almost like your granda, grey hair, very calm, very quiet. And it was the first time in my life, that was in 2006, that I remember thinking, gosh, there's different ways. There are actually different ways to do things. These are totally two different approaches, similar types of schools, and yet they both worked. So, while that's my way of teaching, and why I feel that I am real to parents, I mean, I do a lot of interviews with parents, a lot, and some of them are in despair because they don't know what to do with their kids. Their kids won't come to school. I deal with school refusers. They won't come to school. Or they won't do work or whatever. And I'm able to empathize with them, and say, I've seen this before, don't be worrying about it. I've dealt with a couple of my friends' children, and I try to use my life experience to suit them. And I've always felt that makes me real, and it makes the girls know and the parents know who I am. But I appreciate it's not for everybody, and it probably does depend what kind of school you're in.
Well, I know it definitely works for some students, because I had a conversation, going back a while, but I had a conversation with someone who you had taught, and this is why I knew that you would be great for being able to give advice as to why you have been able to last so long in teaching, and still you're enjoying, you're still looking at everything that you're still wanting to do. And what she told me was,
oh dear, Amanda, I'm waiting here with bated breath.
This is a student who said, Mrs. Luke manages to sneak teach you. She sneak teaches you, because she'll tell you a story about her son, and you don't realise that you're learning something about business studies. And she tells a story about what Thomas was doing, and by the end of it, somehow you've learned about unique selling points for a business. And they said, and her friend agreed and said, yes, I think Mrs. Luke could teach anything. For example, if I went in and she was there sitting in the physics lab to teach physics, I can just picture it already. She would go, energy, I'll teach you about energy. Will you hear what I did yesterday? I would go through everything that she'd been doing. And by the end, you would understand energy.
You would understand it, yeah. So it's like you say, it's a technique, or it's almost like a strategy. And I think, bringing in that positivity to your, I love talking to the girls. Some of them hang around after class and have a bit of a laugh, and that's all just lovely. At the end of my day, I've done this for a very long time now, probably for about 20 years. At the end of the day, we always have an end of day routine, don't we? Whether it is, for me, it's usually washing my teacups, and then I close down my computer, and I either write it on a post-it, or sometimes I just think it. But I just sit in my office, and I just think of something that day that I have done that has helped someone. That could be a member of staff, it could be a parent, it could be, a pupil. And that's when I walk out my door and shut my door at the end of the day, that's what I'm thinking. And even if I've had a day that hasn't gone very well and has been difficult, that's what I leave school with, that thought. And I have found that really revolutionary. I think that small positives shine a light, and actually shine a light on the things in your day that weren't really so good. I know a very eminent heart surgeon, and it's called, actually, I've discovered that it's called a recovery activity. I didn't know it had a name. I just did it. I was on a course and somebody suggested it. And what he does is he plays a video game. So he obviously is in a very high stress situation where he's, dealing with people's hearts. But then he plays, before he leaves, he shuts his computer down, and then he plays a video game, and then he heads out. So I think even that it's just a wee tip, but it sounds a bit corny, but it actually does give you a wee spring in your step as you're leaving school.
No, I think that's great. I don't think that sounds corny at all. I think that sounds really helpful. And I started doing something similar a few years ago. My husband got me a lovely diary, a lovely Terry Pratchett. There's my English coming through again,
nice.
but lovely Terry
Yes,
Pratchett
yes.
diary. And I had been reading different things, especially then once we got into lockdown, I found this helped. I would jot down just one thing that had been good in that day, just one thing. What I discovered looking back over it was I am very food oriented.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Seems I'm a woman of simple pleasures, and as long as a day had a dinner in it, I was quite happy. But I like that idea of making it something school focused to help you almost switch off as you're leaving, to help prevent burnout. If you're able to go, look, and I like the honesty as well, and accepting that some days you're not going to feel like that everything's gone well that day.
No.
But being able to focus on, but I helped that one person to understand this, or to deal with this issue that they were having, or whatever it might be, and being able just to have that built in as a routine of, this is how I am choosing to focus the end of my day. This is what I'm going to leave thinking about. And then that is your off switch, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, it is. And, I always say, if you never, I say this a lot to the pupils, if you never taste a bad apple, you'll never know what a good one tastes like. And that's true. We live in a world, I think, with mental health, you mentioned it earlier, where everybody thinks that you have to feel super dupe all the time. But life isn't like that. You will have troughs, you will have bad apple, and then you will have really good days. And if you don't have bad days, then you can't have the good days. So life isn't supposed to be that you feel wonderful and brilliant every day. Life actually is up and down, and that's actually what makes the good days really good. If I look back on the 30 years and the days that I think are really good, like in-house competitions, watching four sisters stand and singing, or watching the girls perform. One of the things I've been involved in school is school musicals, and Annie and Joseph, and watching some wee girls who, actually, one of them, we found she was an amazing singer. We found her singing in the corridor. That's how we discovered her. And those are such highs. That they get you through the lows. What we do very often is we focus on the bad things. We focus on the bad conversations we've had with parents, the difficult conversations we've had with parents, and we focus on those kind of things rather than the good. I was doing an assembly the other day, actually, and I was talking about, we live in a world where everybody talks about red flags. Oh, that's a red flag. Oh, that's a red flag. And we live in this negative world. And what about talking about the green flags? what are the green flags in your friendship? What's the green flags in your relationship? What's the green flags in your teaching? It's not just the red flags. And I think we've been moved to view that life always has to be rosy, which it isn't. And we've moved to a position where we're looking for the negative. And I was saying to the girls, look for the green lights,
I think that's brilliant. I'm jotting these down so that then before we finish, we can have a little list of some of the lessons that have come out from this discussion. So far, we're
very
on
good.
9. So if we get another 1 in the next few minutes, then that seems a fairly
fantastic.
lovely way to summarize.
Yes,
You were talking there
absolutely.
about whenever you look back over your career so far, what do you think are some of the biggest changes that you've seen, or what hasn't changed? What do you notice there in terms of what's changed or what's stayed? What are the key things that kind of stand out for you?
Well, I think that obviously since I started teaching, teachers have become much more than just a teacher. That's not really it. But when you go into teaching, you were teaching, that was it. Now we've become, we're involved with social workers, we're involved with mental health, we're involved with a much wider range of social problems than we were before. We are extremely underfunded in education. We're all teaching much heavier timetables, and the resources are stretched. I would say that is the biggest thing that I see. And obviously mental health. Mental health is now a huge issue in schools, and COVID obviously didn't help. But it really is quite frightening when you see the statistics and the help that is, the resources for mental health in young people is just so poor. And you see girls, it breaks my heart. I see girls who are sitting on waiting lists for 4 and 5 months, and during that time, it's paralysis because they actually can't get any assistance or any help. And so for me, those are some of the things that have definitely changed. But what hasn't changed is the fact that it's a fantastic job. I love it. The passion that I have for it, and the people that I meet, the new teachers that I meet, and the pupils that come in, all of that hasn't changed. They're all great. They're there to learn. They're thirsty. And no 2 days in a school is ever the same. And that's one of the things that I love about it. One day you could be running around, as I say, stopping water. On another day you could be standing on the stage singing Grease. And that's what I love about school life.
I think that's such a positive note as well to look at. And yes, it's not, as you've said so many times throughout this, it's not pretending everything is rosy and that every day is going to be brilliant. It's looking at it realistically with acceptance that there will be these really good times, and there's also going to be the negatives. But looking at it on the whole, coming back to the title that you'd suggested of long days and short years, those difficult bits might seem long at the time, but the years themselves, if you are enjoying it, if you're in the right career, and if you're in the right school, really will fly by.
And some of those things learn, like I can, I think that in teaching, very often there are times in your teaching career when you can be more vulnerable than others. I know that when I came back from my first maternity leave, and I rocked in, and I had a new briefcase, new shoes, new outfit, new everything. And I rocked into my year 13 class, they were 6th, and there was about 25 of them. And they all started staring at me, and I just lost my confidence. I lifted my briefcase. I'd been teaching maybe 7 years this time, 8 years? No, yeah, 7 years. And I lifted my briefcase and I went home. And I honestly, at that day, never thought I would maybe go back. And I got the courage to phone school at about 3 o'clock and say, I walked out at 3 minutes past 9, and no one had even noticed that I'd left. Which was actually very funny. But that was and it was the principal. She phoned me back and she said, come in the morning. And I said, I don't know if I can do this, and she was, yeah, look, you can. And if there are times when you have vulnerability, but then that's the times that you learn that sustain you then, with the good times, and you balance it all out.
Excellent. Well, I think we have top 10 Erica Luke tips.
Ooh, fantastic.
For enjoying a career in teaching, thriving in it, not just surviving. And they go right the way from NQT the whole way up. So, number 1, don't lie on your CV. Number 2, you have to get yourself a support network. Number 3, as an NQT, everybody wants you to do clubs and everything else, but you have to decide what you want to be involved in.
Yeah.
Number 4, very practical. Any trips, count them in, count them out. 5, I think, is my favourite of them all. Find your fit. Find your fit. 6, don't sit and stress, ask questions because it's not a weakness. 7 was volunteer. You meet new people and it gives you energy. 8, find people you can rely on to help you and accept that you can't do it all, and that's okay. 9,
Yeah.
every day think about how you have helped one person. And then 10, I'm going to separate this one out into look for the green flags as well, not just the reds.
Yeah, that's actually been a very, yeah, I was thinking how will an hour and a half go in, but it's gone in very quickly.
I had no doubt whatsoever that it would, because as I said on Twitter, or X as it is now, whatever I was promoting the show, born storyteller Erica Luke. So I had no compunctions there whatsoever. Well, Erica, thank you so much for
No problem.
joining me tonight and for sharing what you have found in your teaching career so far. And I keep stressing so far because I don't want this to look like, oh, it's 30 years now and she's finished. No, it's 30 years. It's 30 years and you're as full of passion as ever.
Yeah. My husband tells me I have to keep going. So no, I'm only joking. Now, I don't know what I would do if no, it's not on the cards, certainly at the moment. I'm sure my boss won't be too happy about that. I'm only joking.
But thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening live, people who've been joining us in the studio.
Yes, absolutely.
Or anybody who downloads this to listen at a later stage. Thank you very much for joining us. And that is us for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, bye.